had been camping alone for 2 nights by the time it happened. I had picked a small clearing deep in the forest, far from trails and road noise, the kind of place where the wind rustles through the trees like whispers and even the birds are cautious about calling. I liked it because it was quiet, controlled, predictable. I set up my tent early, knowing that by the time night came, I would be exhausted and ready to sleep. Everything that evening had been routine: setting up the tarp, arranging my cooking area, checking my water, and hanging my food bag from a branch. The forest was still, the air crisp and cool, and a low mist hung between the trees. I crawled into my tent, zipped it closed, and lay down, letting the sleeping bag settle around me. I turned off my headlamp and listened to the forest. Usually, the sounds of the night, the distant rustle of leaves, the occasional bird, the sighing wind, helped me relax. That night, everything was muted, as if the forest had gone silent to make room for something else. I drifted in and out of sleep, not fully conscious but not fully unconscious either. My body felt heavy, my mind foggy, and I was vaguely aware of how calm everything seemed. Then it happened. I woke to the sound of breathing, not loud, not harsh, not distant. It was soft, steady, deliberate. I froze immediately, unsure where it was coming from. Then I realized the source of the sound was inches from my face. I could see it in the way the tent fabric slightly pressed inward with each exhale. Every inhale and exhale formed tiny clouds of moisture against the nylon, fogging the wall in real time. The heat and moisture of each breath were palpable. My body went rigid. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. My hands were tense at my sides, my knife within reach, but I didn't grasp it. I forced my mind to focus on my breathing, to keep it quiet, shallow, so that I wouldn't betray any movement. My ears rang from the pounding of my heart. I could hear my blood coursing in my temples, the pulse in my neck, and still the breathing continued, close, unhurried. Minutes passed. The fabric pressed inward slightly with each breath. I could feel the faint brush of it against my eyelashes. Whoever or whatever was outside the tent was careful, patient, close enough that a sudden shift could have revealed them fully, yet deliberate enough to stay just beyond the thin barrier. I tried to think rationally. It had to be an animal, right? But I couldn't reconcile what I was hearing with anything I knew. A raccoon or a deer wouldn't kneel or stay still like this. And the warmth, the humidity, the measured rhythm of the breathing, it felt too deliberate to be natural. I reminded myself not to panic, though my stomach had already tied itself in knots. Every instinct screamed at me to bolt, to lunge, to yell, but I didn't. I stayed frozen. Time became impossible to track. Minutes and hours bled together in the darkness. The breathing remained steady, almost mesmerizing in its regularity. I could feel the shape of it through the tent. Low, kneeling, deliberate. Each exhale pressed the fabric just slightly toward me, like someone testing the boundaries of the material. I kept my eyes open as wide as I could, willing my mind to catalog every detail without moving. Then it stopped. Abruptly, just like that, the rhythm ended. No gradual fading, no footsteps retreating, just silence. The sudden absence of sound was worse than the presence had been. My muscles, tense for hours, went rigid again. My heart skipped several beats as I imagined what had just happened. I did not move. I did not reach for my knife. I did not speak. I lay still, barely daring to breathe, convinced that even the smallest movement could undo whatever fragile safety I had left. I stayed like that until morning. The darkness slowly gave way to pale light seeping between the trees. Shadows shifted, and the forest began to breathe again with its usual sounds. I did not move at first. I waited for some sign, some indication that the presence had returned. There was nothing. The clearing was quiet, the forest indifferent. When I finally gathered the courage, I unzipped the tent slowly. The air was cold, damp, and smelled of earth and pine. The clearing looked normal. My sleeping bag was where I had left it. My pack and stove were undisturbed. The food bag still hung where I had placed it. For a moment, I told myself I had imagined the entire incident, that my sleep-deprived brain had conjured it. Then I saw the grass. Right beside where my head had rested, the ground was flattened in a perfect, small oval, the exact size and shape of someone kneeling. The blades of grass were pressed down, muddy at the base and damp from the morning dew. There were no footprints leading to or from it, no marks beyond the immediate area, nothing disturbed, just that one patch of flattened grass. I knelt down to inspect it, careful not to disturb anything. The imprint was distinct. Whoever had been there had knelt silently, pressed close to the tent, and left without a trace. No rush, no panic, just a measured, controlled action. My stomach turned. The realization hit me fully. Someone had been inches from my face in the night, kneeling deliberately, watching, breathing, and had walked away without disturbing anything else. I packed my tent carefully, checking my surroundings constantly. Every tree, every shadow seemed alive with possibility. Every snapping branch made my heart leap. I did not eat. I did not linger. I stuffed everything into my pack, slung it over my shoulders, and moved as quickly and quietly as I could back toward the main trail. The hike felt impossibly long, every step echoing loudly in my own ears. I imagined the presence returning, following, crouching in the shadows. But when I finally broke through to the main trail and then to the parking area, there was nothing. I reported the incident to the ranger station. They took my statement seriously but could not offer any explanation. There were no other campers or hikers nearby, no reports of intruders, no recent permits issued for the area beyond the main trailhead. I understood why. The place I had camped was far from any marked route, too remote for casual exploration. Whoever had been there had gone to great lengths to remain unseen. I never camped alone again. I still go outdoors, but I take others with me now. I carry multiple forms of protection, check my surroundings constantly, and avoid places without clear trails and human presence. I keep my sleeping area visible, my gear close, and my awareness sharp at all times. I think about that night often. The way the breathing sounded measured and patient. The way the fabric of the tent bowed slightly with each inhale. The perfect imprint of kneeling grass. It was a reminder that even in the quietest, most remote places, there are still others, sometimes silent, sometimes deliberate, sometimes unseen. That night, nothing else happened, but the memory of it, the closeness, and the intention behind the presence never left me. I made it out safely, but I learned quickly that in the wilderness, isolation comes with risks beyond animals or weather. Some dangers are silent, patient, and deliberate, and you only know they exist when you are lucky enough to see or feel their traces. I went camping during a light rain, the kind that never fully turns into a storm but never really stops either. It was steady and thin, tapping on everything with the same soft rhythm. That kind of rain usually relaxes me. It blurs sound and makes the world feel smaller, like I am wrapped in my own space. That night, it did the opposite. I had driven out late in the afternoon and hiked just far enough to put distance between myself and the road. The site I chose was not an official campground, just a flat spot between tall trees where the ground dipped slightly. I checked the area for obvious signs of animals, broken branches, fresh tracks, anything out of place. Everything looked normal. The forest felt empty, washed clean by the rain. I set my tent while the light faded. The sky was gray and low, and the rain never picked up or slowed down. It just stayed the same. I cooked quickly, ate under my tarp, and crawled into my tent early. The rain drummed softly against the fabric. Drops slid down the walls and gathered at the seams. I zipped the tent tight and turned off my headlamp, letting the darkness settle in. Inside the tent, every sound felt closer. The rain made the leaves whisper. Water slid down tree trunks. Somewhere far off, a branch cracked, then nothing. I lay on my side, trying to breathe slowly, matching my breathing to the steady tapping above me. My sleeping bag smelled like damp fabric and dirt. The ground felt colder than I expected. At some point, the tapping changed. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The rain had been so consistent that any break in the pattern stood out. One side of the tent went quiet for a moment, then the sound returned, heavier somehow. I held my breath and listened. The rain kept falling, but something else was there now, mixed in with it. Then the tent wall pushed inward. It was slow and controlled. The fabric pressed toward me like something was leaning against it. Not a sudden hit, not an accident. Just steady pressure, enough to stretch the material but not enough to collapse it. The wall bowed inward and stopped. I froze. My body locked up instantly. My heart slammed so hard it made my ears ring. I stared at the dark shape of the tent wall, waiting for the pressure to pull away. I told myself it could be a branch blown by the rain or an animal brushing past. But the rain had no wind. The trees had been still all evening. The pressure stayed. It did not move. It did not shake or shift like an animal adjusting its weight. It just rested there, patient and firm, like someone testing how strong the tent was. I could see the fabric stretch and hold. I could hear the faint sound of rainwater running down around whatever was pressed against it. I stayed completely still. I did not reach for my headlamp. I did not make a sound. My stomach twisted so hard it made me feel sick. I focused on my breathing, trying to keep it quiet, shallow, controlled. After what felt like forever, the pressure moved. It slid along the side of the tent, dragging slowly from one end toward the other. The fabric rubbed against something solid. I could hear it clearly now, a soft scraping sound, wet and uneven. It did not sound like fur. It did not sound like claws. It sounded like fabric against fabric or skin against nylon. The movement was careful, deliberate. Whoever or whatever was outside was not in a hurry. The pressure traced the length of the tent, then paused again, this time near the middle. The wall bowed inward once more, closer to my torso. I felt trapped inside my own shelter, aware of how thin the barrier really was. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might give me away. I pressed my face into my sleeping bag to muffle my breathing. My hands tingled. My legs felt heavy and useless. I waited for the zipper to move, for fingers to grab it, for something worse to happen. Nothing did. The pressure eased off slowly. The tent wall slid back into place. The scraping sound faded. I heard footsteps move away, careful not to crunch the leaves too loudly. The rain swallowed the sound almost immediately. I stayed awake for the rest of the night. Every small noise made my muscles tighten. Every shift of the rain sounded like movement. I did not sleep. I barely blinked. My body shook from the cold and the adrenaline, but I did not move until the sky began to lighten. When morning finally came, it felt unreal. The rain had slowed to a mist. Pale light filtered through the trees, turning the inside of my tent a dull gray. I waited longer than I needed to, listening, making sure the forest stayed quiet. I unzipped the tent and stepped out. The ground around my campsite was soaked. Mud clung to my boots immediately. I walked slowly around the tent, my eyes fixed on the side where the pressure had been. Along the tent wall were long smears of wet dirt. They ran horizontally, stretched out at about shoulder height. Not scratches, smears, like someone had dragged their arm or shoulder along the fabric. The marks were uneven, darker in some places, lighter in others, following the exact path I had heard in the night. I stepped back and looked at the ground. There were boot prints leading away from the tent. They were clear and deep, pressed into the wet soil. Adult-sized boots. No animal tracks mixed in. No confusion about what made them. The prints came close to the tent, circled once, then led straight into the trees. I felt cold all over. I packed my gear without thinking about order or cleanliness. Everything went into my bag wet and messy. I did not eat. I did not sit down. I kept looking up, scanning the trees, half expecting to see someone standing there watching me. The hike out felt longer than it should have. The forest looked the same as it always does, but it felt different now. The rain made the ground slick and quiet. My own footsteps sounded too loud. I did not stop until I reached my car. I drove away with the heater on full blast, my hands shaking on the wheel. Later, when I cleaned my tent at home, the dirt smears were still there. They had dried into pale streaks that would not fully wash out. I kept them for a while, folded into the fabric, a reminder I did not want to forget too quickly. I stopped camping alone after that. I still go outside. I still hike and spend time in the woods. But I no longer trust the thin walls of a tent or the comfort of familiar sounds. Rain does not calm me anymore. It hides things. It pulls the world in close and makes it easier for someone to stand just outside your shelter, press a hand against the wall, and take their time. I had been to that national forest twice before, which was exactly why I chose it again. It felt familiar in a way that made me careless. Same narrow gravel road to the trailhead. Same faded wooden sign half covered in moss. Same loop trail that cut through thick trees and opened into a small clearing about a mile in. Both previous trips had been quiet and uneventful. I slept well, woke up early, and left feeling reset. That memory made me confident enough to go alone this time. I arrived late in the afternoon. The light was already starting to lean toward evening, and the air had that flat, cool feeling that comes before night settles in. There was no wind. The trees stood still, branches locked in place, and the forest felt heavy, like Saond had nowhere to go. I remember noticing how quiet it was, even for a weekday. No birds, no insects, nothing moving through the brush. That kind of silence usually helped me sleep. I hiked the same trail I always did, keeping my pace steady and familiar. The ground was dry, packed hard from lack of rain, with scattered leaves that cracked under my boots. I reached the clearing just before dark. It was exactly how I remembered it. A flat patch of ground surrounded by trees. No official campsite markings. No fire ring. Just a natural opening that felt hidden. I dropped my pack and started setting up my tent out of habit, muscle memory doing most of the work. As the sun dipped behind the trees, the temperature dropped fast. I cooked a simple meal on my small stove and ate quickly. Not because I felt rushed, but because the quiet was starting to feel thick. The forest did not settle into night the way it usually did. There were no evening sounds ramping up. Stayed dead still. When darkness fully arrived, it came all at once, like someone flipped a switch. I crawled into my tent earlier than usual. I lay on my back, listening, waiting for the normal background noise to kick in. It never did. The silence pressed against the thin walls of the tent, making every small movement inside sound loud. My own breathing felt too sharp. I eventually drifted off, not deeply, but enough that time slipped. I woke suddenly with no slow buildup, no dream fading out. My eyes were already open. At first, I thought I had imagined the sound that pulled me awake. Then I heard it again. Footsteps on dry leaves. They were slow. Each step had weight to it. The leaves crunched and shifted, then paused, then crunched again. The sound was not random. It followed a path. It moved in a curve around my tent. I stayed completely still, my body locked in place, telling myself it was an animal. Deer sometimes moved like that. Even raccoons could sound heavy if they stepped just right. The steps completed a full circle and stopped. The silence after was worse than the sound. I could hear my heart beating. I focused on my breathing, forcing it to stay slow. After a moment that felt longer than it probably was, the footsteps started again. This time they were closer. The leaves cracked right beside the tent wall. I could feel the vibration through the ground. Then I saw the shadow. The moonlight filtered faintly through the trees, just enough to cast shapes through the tent fabric. The shadow was low, close to the ground, and wrong. It shifted, and I realized I was looking at legs. Human legs. Straight lines where knees bent, feet planted in place. The shadow stopped near my head, close enough that I could make out the shape clearly. I heard breathing. It was slow and steady, not rushed, not nervous. It sounded patient, like whoever it was had nowhere else to be and nothing pressing them to move. The breathing stayed close, right beside my head. I did not move a muscle. I did not reach for anything. I did not unzip the tent or clear my throat or shift my weight. I stayed frozen, hoping that being still would make me invisible. Time stretched. My limbs went numb. My jaw ached from clenching. The breathing stayed, then shifted slightly, moving along the side of the tent. The footsteps resumed, slow again, deliberate again. They circled the tent another time, then another. Each loop felt tighter, closer, like the person was mapping the space. At some point, I stopped counting the circles. My sense of time fell apart. I only knew that the breathing would come close, pause, then drift away, then return. I never heard a voice. I never heard tools or metal or fabric rustling. Just boots on leaves and breath in the dark. Eventually, the footsteps moved farther away. They faded into the trees, not quickly, not running. I waited for the sound of them leaving the clearing. It never came. The forest stayed quiet, like it had swallowed the noise whole. I lay there, wide awake, until the sky began to lighten. When the sun finally came up, it did not bring relief right away. I stayed inside the tent for a long time, listening, watching the light change the fabric from dark gray to pale orange. Only when I could clearly see my surroundings through the thin walls did I move. I unzipped the tent slowly. The air outside was cold and still. The clearing looked normal at first glance. Trees stood where they always had. No movement, no sound. I stepped out carefully and looked down. The ground around my tent was marked with deep boot prints. They were clear and fresh, pressed hard into the dry soil, circling the tent again and again. The pattern was obvious. Whoever had been there had walked around me for a long time. The prints did not lead toward any trail. They appeared from the trees and vanished back into them, as if the person had stepped out of nowhere and returned the same way. I stood there, staring, feeling sick. I checked my gear. Nothing was taken. Nothing was disturbed. My pack was where I left it. My food was untouched. That made it worse. There had been no reason for them to be there except me. I packed as fast as my hands would allow. I did not eat. I did not sit down. I kept scanning the tree line, expecting movement, expecting to see someone watching. The forest stayed silent. The hike out felt longer than it ever had. Every sound made my shoulders tense. Every bend in the trail made my stomach drop. I did not stop until I reached my car. Even then, I sat inside for a while, doors locked, breathing slowly, letting my hands stop shaking. I drove away without looking back. Later, I reported what happened, but nothing came of it. There were no cameras, no witnesses, no explanation. The forest stayed the same on paper, just trees and trails and open land. I still think about that night, not in flashes but in details. The patience in the breathing, the way the footsteps never hurried, the fact that they never tried to open the tent. That choice felt intentional. I never camped alone again. I still go outdoors, still hike, still respect the quiet. But I no longer mistake silence for safety. Some places stay quiet because something is listening. I remember falling asleep without meaning to. I had told myself I would stay awake longer, listen to the forest, make sure everything felt right. But the day had been long, and the hike in had drained me more than I expected. My body shut down before my mind could catch up. The campsite was nothing special. A flat patch of dirt tucked between tall trees, far from any marked trail. I had chosen it because it felt hidden. The ground was dry, the air cool, and the forest had settled into a low, steady quiet by the time I crawled into my tent. No wind, no rain, just the faint sounds of distant insects and branches shifting far away. Inside the tent, I zipped everything closed carefully, double-checking the zipper out of habit. I laid my knife within reach like I always did, not because I expected to need it, but because it made me feel prepared. The tent smelled like old fabric and dust. My sleeping bag was warm and tight around my shoulders. Sleep came in pieces. I drifted in and out, aware of my surroundings but not fully present. Every small sound threaded its way into my dreams. Leaves shifting, a branch snapping somewhere far off, my own breathing echoing too loud inside the tent. Then I heard it. At first, my brain tried to fold the sound into a dream. A soft scrape, slow and steady. Took a few seconds for the meaning to register. When it did, my eyes flew open. The zipper was moving. I did not need to see it to know. The sound was unmistakable. The metal teeth separating with a slow, controlled pull. Downward, careful, quiet. My body locked up instantly. Every muscle tightened at once. My sleeping bag felt suddenly too tight, pressing against my chest, trapping my arms. I focused on breathing through my nose, shallow and slow, afraid that even the sound of air moving would give me away. The zipper stopped. I stared at the dark shape of the tent ceiling, my eyes burning, waiting. My heart slammed so hard it felt like it was shaking my ribs. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Then the zipper moved again, just an inch, maybe less. The sound was slow, deliberate, like whoever was outside was testing how much noise it made. There was no rush in it, no panic, just patience. I slid my hand toward the knife without looking. My fingers closed around the handle, slick with sweat. I did not pull it free. I just held it there, gripping it too tight, feeling the shape of it ground me in the moment. The zipper stopped halfway down, stayed there, no sudden movement, no tug to open it fully, just that halfway point frozen in place. I imagined fingers resting on the pull tab, still and ready. I imagined a face inches from the opening, watching the shape of my body through the fabric, listening to my breathing. Nothing happened. Seconds stretched into minutes. My arms began to ache from holding still. My jaw hurt from clenching. I could feel the pulse in my neck, in my wrists, in my temples. I waited for the next movement, convinced it would come. It never did. I stayed awake for the rest of the night. I did not sleep again, not even for a second. I did not move. I kept my eyes open, staring into the dark, listening to every sound the forest made. Every creak of a tree made my stomach drop. Every distant snap made my grip tighten on the knife. The zipper never moved again. When the sky finally began to lighten, it felt unreal, like waking up from something that should not have happened. The darkness inside the tent slowly turned gray. Shapes became clearer. The outline of the zipper was visible now. It was exactly where I remembered it, half open. I waited longer than I needed to, listening, making sure the forest stayed quiet. When I finally sat up, my body trembled. The adrenaline that had held me together all night started to drain away, leaving me weak and shaky. I pushed the sleeping bag down and carefully leaned forward, peering through the gap in the zipper. Nothing waited on the other side, just empty air and trees standing still in the early morning light. I unzipped the rest of the tent slowly and stepped out. The campsite looked normal at first glance. My gear sat where I had left it. No obvious signs of disturbance. No movement in the trees. Birds had started up somewhere off to the side, their calls sounding too cheerful for how I felt. As I packed my gear, my hands shook so badly I kept dropping things. I did not eat. I did not take breaks. I just worked through the motions, desperate to be done. When I went to take down the tent, I saw it. On the inside of the fabric, right where my face had been during the night, there were fingerprints. They were faint but clear, pressed into the thin layer of condensation that had built up inside the tent. For fingers and a thumb, the shape was unmistakable. The prints were positioned at head height, right near the zipper opening, like someone had leaned in close. I stared at them for a long time, my stomach twisting. They were too large to be mine. The spacing was wrong. The angle was wrong. And they were on the inside of the tent wall, not the outside, where warm breath and pressure had fogged the fabric. Someone had been that close. I wiped the condensation away without thinking, smearing the prints until they disappeared. The act did nothing to calm me. If anything, it made the moment feel more real, more final. I packed everything into my bag and left the campsite without looking back. The hike out felt longer than it should have. Every step echoed too loud. Every shadow between the trees made my heart jump. When I reached my car, I locked the doors and sat there for a long time, breathing slowly, letting the shaking pass. Only then did I allow myself to think clearly. The zipper had not opened fully. Whoever was there had stopped on purpose. They had been close enough to touch my face, close enough to open the tent completely if they wanted to. They chose not to. I never found out who it was or why they stopped. I never saw anyone else on the trail. I never heard anything that explained it away. There was no animal that could have done what I saw. No accident that fit the details. I still think about that choice. The moment where they paused and decided to leave the zipper half open. That hesitation is what stays with me more than anything else. I stopped camping alone after that night. I still go into the woods, still sleep outdoors sometimes, but never by myself. I no longer trust the thin barrier of a tent or the comfort of isolation. Being alone out there does not feel peaceful anymore. It feels like an invitation. I had been hiking for 3 days straight, pushing through a section of the trail that few people ever attempted. It wasn't that the terrain was impossible, it wasn't, but it was remote, far from marked paths and far from the nearest ranger station. The kind of place where you trusted only yourself and your planning. By the 3rd day, I hadn't seen another person. The solitude was peaceful at first, even comforting. But by nightfall, it started to feel heavy, like the forest itself was pressing down. I set up my tent in a small clearing, just wide enough to fit it and my small cooking area. The light from my headlamp splashed across the wet leaves and fallen branches, making them glint like scattered glass. I had hung my food bag high in a tree, following all the standard bear precautions, and I checked my water supply and stove. Everything felt normal, the way it always did. I told myself I was overthinking, that the forest was quiet and empty and safe. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow thrown by my own lantern or a trick of the trees bending in the wind. There, far back between 2 large pines, was a shape. Human-shaped, tall, upright, still. It did not move at first. I froze, unsure whether I should move closer to get a better look or just ignore it. My heart was beating hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. Then it moved. Not toward me, not running, not waving. Just shifted slightly, as if adjusting its stance, but never taking a step forward. My stomach dropped. It wasn't a deer or any other animal. The shape was unmistakably human. The dark made it impossible to see details, but the posture, the height, the stillness, it was a person. I told myself it could be another hiker, lost, watching me the same way I watched it. That thought made me feel marginally better, until I realized the nearest marked trail was over 10 miles behind me. The person would have to know exactly where they were going to find me here. As the sun dipped lower and the light faded, the figure stayed in the same spot, silent, still. It did not approach, it did not leave. It didn't wave, didn't make a sound, didn't signal in any way. Just watched. I kept my head down, continued setting up my tent and food area, doing everything as normally as I could. Every now and then, I caught the outline of the figure shifting slightly, as if it had adjusted its position to keep me in sight. Night came, the sky deep black, the forest alive with the usual sounds. Frogs, the occasional owl, insects. But in the silence closer to me, nothing moved except for the figure. I couldn't see it now, only the sense of presence at the edge of my vision. And then the movements started around my campsite. It began with soft scraping noises on the forest floor, low and deliberate. I could hear footsteps on dry leaves, the kind that seemed louder in the quiet. Slow pacing, no rush, no panic, no running away. Whoever it was knew exactly where my tent was, where my stove and backpack were, where I had hung my food. The movements circled once, twice, then slowed to a crawl, lingering near the edges of my tent, brushing past rocks and roots with careful steps, never stepping directly on anything that would make a loud snap. I did not move. I did not speak. I stayed frozen, listening. My knife was next to me, and my flashlight sat unused. I knew that if this person wanted to confront me, there would be nothing I could do. The realization made my hands shake, my breathing shallow. Hours passed like that. The slow pacing stopped at some point, though I could not tell exactly when. Every sound after that felt amplified. The rain on the leaves, the wind brushing through the pines, the distant water of a creek I hadn't noticed before. I tried to convince myself it was someone leaving, heading back into the deeper woods. But the memory of that tall, unmoving figure, watching me from the shadows, did not fade. Morning finally came. Pale light filtered through the trees. I unzipped my tent carefully, expecting either to find nothing at all or to see the figure standing there, waiting. Neither was the case. The clearing was empty. Birds called in the distance. Leaves glistened with dew. It looked peaceful, almost too peaceful. I went to check my food bag, hung high in a tree as usual. My stomach sank when I saw it. The bag had been cut down cleanly from its rope and placed neatly beside my tent. Not thrown, not knocked over, not ripped open, just laid on the ground. Nothing inside was missing. I could see the careful folds of the rope where it had been cut. Whoever had been here had been deliberate, precise. Every detail, every action left nothing to chance. I packed my tent slowly, my hands still shaking. The forest felt too quiet, like it had held its breath and only now let it out. Every small sound made me flinch. Every movement of branches in the morning wind felt deliberate, as if someone was still just out of sight. I did not stop to eat breakfast. I did not linger to take pictures or enjoy the morning. I stuffed everything into my pack, slung it over my shoulders, and started hiking out. The trail back felt impossibly long. I kept scanning the trees, half expecting to see the figure again, half hoping it wasn't there. I stayed alert, moving as quickly as I could without running. My pack weighed less than it had coming in, but my chest felt heavy, my heart still hammering. When I reached the ranger station, I asked about permits. The ranger checked the log. No one else had a permit in that area. No one was registered to be on the trail during that time. I felt the color drain from my face. The ranger looked at me, confused at first, then serious when he saw my expression. He said people did occasionally wander in without permits, but to go that deep, that far from trails and signs was dangerous and very rare. I explained what happened, tried to keep my voice steady, tried to make it sound like I was rational, but the ranger gave me the same advice I had been following in my head since nightfall. Stay aware, stay prepared, and never, ever assume the wilderness is empty. I never camped in that area again. I still hike, but I always stick to marked trails now, in the company of others whenever possible. I carry extra safety gear. I tell people exactly where I am going, and I never, ever forget how it felt to know someone was watching me. Not from far away, not accidentally, but with the intention to track my movements without ever revealing themselves. That figure, standing silently in the trees, and the careful handling of my food bag, stay with me. They remind me that the forest is not always empty. Sometimes it holds more than the trees and the wind. Sometimes it holds people who are patient, precise, and unseen. I made it out unharmed that time, but I learned quickly that being prepared is only part of surviving. Awareness and respect for the unknown are everything. I had been hiking alone for several days in a section of the forest that few people ever reached. I liked the solitude at first, the way the trees pressed close, the faint scent of pine needles and earth filling the air, the muted light filtering through the canopy. By the third night, I hadn't seen another soul. No other hikers, no campers, nothing beyond birds and the occasional rustle of small animals. I set up my tent in a small clearing, carefully leveling the ground and removing sticks and rocks. I hung my food bag high in a tree and checked my gear twice before crawling into my sleeping bag. Everything felt routine. Everything felt safe. At first, sleep came in pieces. The usual night sounds, the wind brushing against the leaves, distant birds settling for the night, the soft rustle of the forest floor, provided a strange comfort. I drifted, stirred, shifted in my sleeping bag. Then I noticed it. Every time I moved, I heard movement outside my tent. It started subtly. I rolled onto my side, adjusting my sleeping bag to be more comfortable. A faint crunch of leaves came from outside. I froze, listening, my ears strained against the night. Another small rustle. Not distant, not random. It matched me exactly. I sat up to peer through the thin tent fabric, trying to convince myself it was an animal. But the sound followed me perfectly. Every slight adjustment of my weight, every small motion, was mirrored by a crunch on the forest floor outside. I froze completely. My heart was hammering. My hands gripped the edge of the sleeping bag so hard I could feel my fingernails pressing into my palms. The forest itself seemed to notice my stillness. The wind stopped. No branches shifted. No distant water sounded. Everything fell silent, as though the forest was holding its breath. I could hear my own breathing, loud in my ears, and the faint beat of my pulse in my temples. I did not move. I did not blink. I only listened. Minutes passed, long minutes, and then a single movement outside the tent. A deliberate step on leaves, careful, slow, and exact, like someone testing whether I was awake. It was close enough that I could sense the presence through the thin fabric. My stomach dropped. Whoever it was knew where I was. They had been following me, or at least tracking my movements without ever revealing themselves. I stayed motionless, holding my breath, willing the sound to stop, willing them to leave. The minutes stretched into an eternity. I felt my muscles cramp, my back ache from lying completely still, my shoulders stiff and tense. I did not dare shift in the slightest. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to react, to flee, to defend myself. But I could not. I could only listen and feel. The movement outside the tent came again, not immediately, not repeatedly. Just a single, deliberate step. Then silence. The forest remained quiet until dawn, as if the presence outside the tent had melted into the trees, waiting, watching, without ever making a mistake. When the first light of morning broke through the canopy, I waited a long time before unzipping the tent. The forest looked ordinary in the daylight. Dew covered the leaves, small birds called to each other in the trees, and the soft rustle of wind moved through the branches. But as I stepped out of the tent, my stomach dropped. On the ground around my campsite, there was a second set of footprints. They matched my own size almost perfectly, one foot after the other, pressed into the damp soil and fallen leaves. The prints circled the tent, following the exact path I had been lying in. They stopped precisely where my head had rested the night before. There were no tracks leading away beyond the clearing. No other marks, just those prints. I knelt down, examining them carefully. The impression of each foot was clear, heel, arch, toes, perfectly human. The size matched my own boots, as if someone had traced my movements while I slept. Sent a chill down my spine. Whoever had been there had walked around the tent, step by step, silently, deliberately, and had stopped at my head. There was no sign of intrusion beyond the prints. No footprints leading back into the woods. No dragging, no signs of disturbance. Just the perfect, mirrored path of my own movements. I could still feel the memory of the night pressing in on me. The crunch of leaves with every movement, the deliberate step in the darkness, the way the forest had gone completely silent. I packed my tent methodically, my hands shaking, constantly scanning the edge of the clearing. Every shadow, every tree, seemed alive, hiding someone I could not see. I did not stop to eat or take a break. I stuffed my gear into my pack as quickly and quietly as I could and started hiking back toward the main trail. The walk out felt impossibly long. Every branch that shifted, every bird that called, every leaf that rustled underfoot made me tense. I moved quickly, eyes scanning every shadow, every tree line, expecting to see the figure again. But there was nothing, just the forest, indifferent and quiet. When I finally reached the main trailhead, I reported the incident to the ranger station. They asked questions, took notes, and seemed concerned but skeptical. They said no other hikers had been recorded in that section of the forest during that time. No permits had been issued. The area was considered remote enough that encounters were extremely rare. I realized then that whoever or whatever had been circling my tent had not been a permitted hiker, not someone officially registered. It had been deliberate, planned, and careful. I never camped alone after that. I still go outdoors, but I always stick to well-traveled trails and campgrounds where other people are nearby. I carry extra safety gear, I leave detailed itineraries, and I never ignore the feeling of being watched. The image of those footprints, perfectly tracing my movements and stopping at my head, stays with me. It is a reminder that the forest can hold more than just trees and wildlife. Sometimes it holds patience, precision, and intention that you can't predict. That night taught me to respect solitude, but also to respect the fact that isolation can make you vulnerable in ways you never imagined. Even now, I remember the crunch of leaves that matched my movements exactly, the way the forest went silent when I froze, and the deliberate step outside my tent that tested me without ever revealing itself fully. That memory is burned into me. I survived, but I understand now that being alone in the forest is not always harmless. Someone or something can be there, invisible, patient, and precise, waiting for you to make the slightest motion before making theirs. I made it out physically unharmed, but the lesson I learned has never left me. Awareness, vigilance, and respect are not just useful, they are essential. Every time I hear leaves crunching in the quiet, even in my own backyard, my body reacts the same way. Remembering the night my movements were mirrored perfectly and the footsteps stopped exactly at the place where my head had been. I had been hiking all afternoon, looking for a quiet spot to set up camp. The trail I had been following wound through dense forest, occasionally opening into small clearings where the ground was flat enough to pitch a tent. By the time I came across the old fire ring, the sun was low, casting long shadows between the trees. The fire ring was weathered and darkened by years of use, stones cracked and blackened with soot, surrounded by dry leaves and pine needles. I told myself it had been abandoned for years. No fresh tracks, no smoke scent, nothing recent. It was the perfect place, flat and sheltered by a few pines, away from the main trail. I set my tent up carefully, checking the ground for rocks and roots. The air was still, a calm that felt almost too quiet. I hung my backpack in the usual spot, checked my stove and food supplies, and went through the motions I had followed 100 times. Everything felt normal, routine. After a simple dinner cooked over my small stove, I crawled into my tent, zipped it closed, and settled into my sleeping bag. The night was cool, the air smelling of damp earth and pine. My headlamp was off, leaving me in near darkness, with only the faint glow of the fading sunset through the fabric. Sleep came in fragments. I had a long day, and my body was exhausted, but every time I started drifting off, a sound would make me pause. At first, I thought it was the usual night noises. Wind brushing against leaves, a branch falling somewhere far off. But then, around midnight, I heard something different. It started softly, almost imperceptibly. Metal clinking together, a faint, irregular sound. Then the rustle of fabric. Not close, but not far either. I froze instantly, holding my breath. My heart was pounding so hard it made the tent walls shake slightly with every beat. I told myself it was impossible, that no one could be out here, not this late, not in this abandoned area, but the sounds continued. The clinking and rustling moved slowly, deliberately, around the edges of my campsite. It wasn't rushed, panicked, or careless. Whoever was there was being careful. Quiet, too quiet. I could hear nothing beyond the soft shuffle of movement, the brushing of gear against the ground, the faint hiss of fabric shifting. I stayed perfectly still, my hands gripping my sleeping bag, my knife within reach but untouched. Time stretched, minutes passed, or maybe hours. I had no way of telling. Every sound I heard made me flinch, my muscles tense like steel wires. I could imagine someone moving around outside, assessing everything I had set up. My tent, my backpack, my food supplies. Every clink of metal or rustle of fabric made my stomach tighten. Whoever it was knew exactly where they were stepping, where to avoid snapping branches or rustling leaves. Eventually, the sounds stopped. Silence settled back into the clearing, heavy and tense. I did not move. I could not move. My body ached from lying still, my mind spinning with every possible explanation. An animal could not handle gear this delicately. No bear, raccoon, or deer could move fabric, handle metal, and step carefully around a tent without leaving some chaotic sign. I had a sinking feeling I was dealing with a human, someone patient, deliberate, and close enough to reach me if they chose to. Morning came slowly. The sky lightened, pale gray through the trees, and the forest began to wake. Birds called in the distance, insects stirred in the leaves, and the soft rush of wind moved through the pines. I waited, tense, before unzipping my tent. My hands shook as I peeked outside, scanning the area carefully. At first glance, everything looked normal. My tent was still there. My food bag was untouched. Nothing seemed disturbed, but then I noticed small, subtle changes. My backpack, which I had carefully leaned against a tree, had been nudged slightly, rotated almost imperceptibly. My boots, which I had left facing the tent entrance, now pointed toward the forest, and my tent stakes, securely hammered into the ground the night before, had been pushed in deeper, as though someone had checked the tension of the fabric and adjusted it. The realization hit me hard. Someone had been here quietly, carefully, and had moved around my camp while I slept. They had been close enough to touch my things, to manipulate my gear, without ever alerting me fully. The precision and care were chilling. They had not ransacked anything. They had not tried to confront me or enter the tent. But the act itself, the knowledge that someone had been there, watching, handling my belongings, and leaving no clear traces of their presence beyond these subtle alterations, was enough to make my stomach churn. I packed my gear as quickly and quietly as I could. Every movement felt exaggerated in the still morning air, and every shadow seemed to hide someone observing. I checked the clearing repeatedly, scanning the trees, scanning the ground. There was no one there. No footprints beyond the obvious marks where I had walked. No disturbance in the leaves that suggested hurried movement. Whoever it was had been methodical, leaving no tracks beyond the tiny, deliberate signs I had discovered. I left immediately, moving fast back toward the main trail, my senses hyper-aware. Every twig snapping under my boots, every shift in the wind, every call from a bird made me flinch. I did not stop for breakfast or water beyond the absolute minimum. The forest felt different now, less welcoming, more deliberate. I felt its weight pressing in from all sides, reminding me that I had not been alone. When I reached the ranger station later that day, I reported the incident. The ranger listened carefully, asking questions and noting the details, but confirmed that no other permits had been issued for that area, and no other hikers were known to have been nearby. The place was remote enough that encounters were rare, but clearly not impossible. Whoever had been there had come prepared, moving silently and with patience. I never camped near an old fire ring again. The memory of that night stayed with me. The subtle clinking of metal, the careful brushing of fabric, the slow, deliberate movements around my tent. It was a stark reminder that familiarity and routine do not guarantee safety, and that even in the forest, where I had felt completely alone, someone else could be watching, patient and quiet, close enough to touch my life without leaving obvious evidence. I still hike in the wilderness, but now I stick to clearings that have no signs of previous use, camp well away from established fire rings, and carry multiple layers of awareness and protection. That night taught me that solitude has a cost, and that vigilance is as important as preparation. Every time I enter a clearing, I instinctively check for subtle signs, for disturbances too small to notice at first glance, for evidence that I may not be alone, even when I believe I am. The forest may seem empty, but that night proved otherwise.